With only a few hours left before his execution, his last request was not a final meal or a phone call, but to see his dog one last time. But what happened after that silenced the prison, froze the guards, and revealed a truth buried for years. That morning, the air in the prison was heavier, as if the walls themselves knew what was about to happen. Every sound, the jingling of keys, the echo of boots on concrete, carried a weight that pressed down on everyone inside. In his cell, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, his hands loosely clasped, his eyes fixed on the cold floor. He was no longer the same man who had entered 7 years earlier. Time and regret had carved deep lines into his face, softening the sharp defiance that once burned in his eyes. The guards expected the usual last requests, a steak for dinner, a phone call to family, or perhaps a final letter. But when the warden asked, Daniel's voice was low and steady. "I want to see my dog, Max." Some guards exchanged glances, a condemned man choosing a dog over people. This was unprecedented. But for Daniel, Max was not just a pet. He was the only one who had stood by his side, before the arrest, before the trial, before the world turned its back on him. In his final hours, he didn't want mercy from strangers. He only wanted to look into the eyes that had never judged him. The warden leaned back, his fingers interlocked. He had seen strange last requests before: ice cream, a guitar, a broken radio. But bringing a dog into a maximum security prison on execution day, this had never happened. In the control room, officers argued. One said, "It's a security risk. We have never allowed an animal in here, especially not for a death row inmate." Then an older officer spoke. "Max is all he has. No visitors, no letters, no one. Maybe we should let him go in peace." The warden asked for Daniel's file. It was clean. No fights, no violations, no escape attempts. In his personal records, it showed he had owned a German Shepherd for 8 years, named Max, taken at the time of his arrest. After a long silence, the warden nodded. "All right, but under strict supervision, in the yard, and only for a few minutes." The news spread quickly. Some guards shook their heads, others whispered about the bond between the man and his dog. But for Daniel, those 10 minutes would mean a lifetime. Somewhere out there, Max was on his way. Neither of them knew how much this moment would change everything. The prison yard stood still as the far gate screeched open. Daniel stood just feet from the single chair of execution, his wrists loosely cuffed in front of him, his eyes fixed on the entrance. Then Max rushed in. His black and brown fur glistened under the pale morning light. 2 officers held him by the leash, but it was obvious that Max had already spotted his owner. His ears shot forward, his tail wagged slowly at first, then faster and faster. Daniel's breath caught. Years had passed, but nothing, not the gray in his beard, nor the slight stiffness in his legs, could hide him from the dog he had raised. The warden gave a single mod. The leash slackened. Max lunged forward. Daniel dropped to his knees the instant the dog collided with his chest, pressing his head into Daniel's shoulder, releasing a sound that was both joy and sorrow. For a moment, the prison disappeared. No countdown, no execution order, just a man and his dog, reunited. Daniel buried his face in the thick fur, inhaling memories as they poured back. Long walks, muddy paws, quiet nights when Max's steady breathing had kept him from falling apart. But then Max froze. His body stiffened, his tail stopped mid-swing. His ears tilted. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. Daniel felt it before he heard it. Max was no longer looking at him. His eyes were locked on a man standing 3 meters away, Officer Gene Kins, tall, stiff, hands clasped before him. The growl deepened. His teeth flashed in a silent warning. Guards shifted uneasily. "Control your dog," one muttered as he stepped forward. But Daniel placed his hand gently on Max's back, whispering, "Easy, Max. It's all right." But it wasn't. Max had never barked without reason. Kins avoided his eyes, his jaw tight. Daniel's thoughts raced. He knew his dog's instincts, and Max was never wrong. For the first time that morning, Daniel felt something stir inside him. Curiosity. Something about this man had triggered Max. And in a place where every second mattered, instincts, especially a dog's instincts, could mean everything. Max remained tense, his body angled toward the gate where Kins had disappeared. Officer Ramirez, a guard Daniel had always respected, approached quietly and said in a low voice, "Your dog has a sharp nose. What's his problem with Kins?" Daniel kept his eyes on Max, but his mind raced. If Kins had been there, why had he never mentioned it in his statement? As if summoned, Kins reappeared at the far end of the yard. Max erupted in sharp, relentless barking, his eyes narrowed. Ramirez muttered, "This isn't normal." The warden watching from the tower called down, "What's going on?" No one answered. The air was charged. Something unspoken was unfolding. Daniel knew one thing. This was not just a farewell. It was the beginning of something else. And if Max was right, this yard was not a place of endings, but the battlefield for the truth. Later that afternoon, the warden summoned Daniel to a small interrogation room. Max was allowed to stay, watching the door like a guard. Ramirez stood in the corner, arms folded. Kins stood before them, stiff, eyes cold. The warden spoke. "Kins, why did you not report being at the scene the night Daniel was arrested?" Kins clenched his jaw. "I didn't think it mattered. I was off duty, just passing by." Max exploded into a sudden thunderous bark, eyes fixed on Kins, his growl rising like thunder. Ramirez stepped forward. Strange, because a new witness just came forward, said they saw a man matching your description leaving Daniel's house before the police arrived. The warden's face hardened. "We are reopening the case. The execution is immediately postponed." Daniel felt air flood back into his lungs. Not freedom, not yet, but hope. Kins glared at him, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, the truth had begun to surface. All because a dog refused to forget. The investigation moved quickly. The new witness, the fingerprints, re-examined. They weren't Daniel's. They matched Gene Kins. Weeks passed. More evidence emerged. Kins had been at the crime scene. He had planted the evidence. He had committed the murder. He was arrested, charged with the very crime Daniel had been condemned for. The charges against Daniel were dropped, and the prison gates, once the end of his life, swung open to release him. And there, just beyond the fence, was Max. His tail wagged, his eyes shining. Daniel dropped to his knees, burying his face in the fur. "We made it, my friend. We did it." He stepped forward. No chains, no guards, no walls. Just open sky and the sound of 2 sets of footsteps on empty ground. The world had not changed much, but Daniel had. He was no longer the condemned man. He was the man his dog had always believed in, and now, thanks to that loyalty, he had been given a second chance. This story reminds us that love does not need words, that loyalty does not care about courtrooms or time. Sometimes truth does not come from the witness stand, but from a dog who remembers. If this story touched you, don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe. Follow us for more moving and powerful stories about courage, loyalty, and second chances. Your next journey begins now, on the screen before you.